First of all, I just wanted to welcome everybody to the Virtual Center for Archives and Records Administration. My name is Matt Carmichael. I am Dr. Franks' assistant here in Vicara, and just want to welcome everybody here today. It's a great turnout, and just wanted to, first of all, introduce our guest speaker here today, Diane Knoll, who is a professor in the Department of Information and Computer Sciences, the Library's Information Science program. And her research focuses on the role of affect and emotion in socio-technical learning environments, including the web and virtual worlds. And so, without further ado, I'm going to sit down and let Diane speak.
Thank you so much, Matt, and thank you, Pat and Lori, for inviting me to come and talk at San Jose State University, the SLIS school. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm really happy, and I love this topic. It's something that I've gotten into fairly recently, and I think it's just a very interesting topic. And of course, I wouldn't have even known about it if I hadn't come into Second Life in 2008, because I kept reading that librarians were in this thing called Second Life. And well, I won't go into my tortured way of figuring out how to do it, but I've been here since then and try to involve my students in various courses in using Second Life as an environment. Lori was one of the first people that I met, and she's had a huge influence on me, and I'm really a pleasure. It's really a pleasure to be here in an environment with you again, Lori. So let me get started. This is about gamification in university courses, and just to give a brief overview, gamification involves applying some of the elements that are used in game design to educational content and to information problem solving in order to increase student involvement with course concepts and to enhance learning and retention. In this presentation, I'm going to describe how 4 essential elements that are found in games and how 4 affective skill areas that are inherent in computer games were mapped to the content in 8 different university courses. These were taught in either hybrid or online modes, and the activities were designed to interest students in tapping these skills that I will cover a little bit later. We did analysis of structured self-reports written by the students, lab reports, chat logs, and their threaded discussions. And that generated illustrations from various assignments that were addressing our gamified aspects. So I'll give you a couple of examples of that later. These selected gamification strategies we've used have evolved over a 4-year period in response to the students, and they continue to be developed, to be incorporated, and to be evaluated for their potential to influence learning, and we have to keep adding new ones all the time. This presentation is going to begin with a broad overview of the spread of games and gamification, including some definitions, a lot of resources, and significant people. The note card that you received has the text of this talk in it, and it has all the references and all the links, so you can get to the things that are being discussed. So let me begin with something that I always find astounding, which is the charts from K0 worldwide. And this is a European company that tracks the virtual world industry, the game industry, especially with regard to virtual worlds. And so they track when worlds come into existence, their dates. You can see in the chart across the top line and the side line, it gives the date when a game was initiated, and then it shows the growth of the accounts in that game. And you can see this is age 10 through age 15, and the larger the dot, of course, the greater number of accounts. So Club Penguin is really big there, and Stardoll too. But all of these are have over 1 million accounts. And it's just phenomenal to see this. And I'm fortunate that I have grandchildren who are ages 7 and 9. And there's a part of this K0 chart covers that age group too. But I look at this age group because they're the ones that are closer to coming into the environment where I exist in college, for example. And I see that we have to change the way we do education because of this phenomenon of millions and millions of kids playing games. And if we look at the older age group, it's also there's a lot of development there, but not as much as that younger age group. So from age 15 to 20, there are fewer games that have over 1 million accounts. But Habbo Hotel, the largest one there, is right on the line for 15-year-olds. So younger kids can play that too, and as well as older people. So it's just fascinating to see this development, and also to know that the statistics that are out there on what people spend on games in the United States and worldwide vary quite a bit. But I think a conservative one that I found is that in the U.S. in 2012, there were 167 million players, and they spent $14.8 billion on the games that they play. And this is even given the case that many games are free, like Second Life, for example, and lots of apps are free as well, and kids are playing everything. My grandchildren play like a new game every week and a half or so. They say, "We got a new one. You got to download it. It's free," because they know I won't spend money on those kinds of apps. I'd go broke if I did. And then they introduced me to it, and the latest one was samurais versus zombies. They're very enamored with that one. And also Heyday, a farming game. So I play these games with them because I was never a gamer, and I really need to learn what motivates people and what is fun about that kind of environment. So it started in 2008 when I came to Second Life, and immediately I felt the fun. It was just like a sort of injection just from the environment itself. So millions of tweens and teens are already playing a lot of social video games. If you have questions as I go along, you can enter them in chat, and if somebody could answer Hyacinth, I would appreciate it. All right, so my next slide is about the research on games for education. The goal of this research is to see if they do increase student engagement with course content. And some of the findings are that I'm sorry, I was reading. Some of the findings here have to do with what makes games effective for learning. And one of the things that's really important is the level of interactivity of the learners. The more the interactivity, the better. That's one of the problems that students have with Second Life. When they land in it, they expect it to be a game, but instead it's an environment that looks like a game. And you could play games with it or in it, but it's not obvious to the person who just lands there how to go about doing that. So that's always been a challenge. And educators who use Second Life have to set up their environments to immediately engage people. And another point is that they're effective in improving student participation and performance by providing frequent feedback. So there has to be this constant feedback so that people feel like something is happening and they're getting something done. And thirdly, role-playing in immersive environments has been found to enhance the sense of reality due to the setting and the dramatic characters and the ability to take somebody's perspective. So there are different kinds of games, different categories of games. And here's a little bit of the definition that you'll find repeated everywhere when you search for this to find out what is the definition of gamification. So they point out that it's the use of a non-game context with game elements applied. And that can be applied to a very high degree or a very minimal degree. There's lots of different variety in the way that that's done. We'll tell you later in this talk what I've done and what I intend to keep doing. But one of the main points throughout all of this research and all of these definitions is that fun is a required element. Beyond the systematic elements and any other kinds of things that you must cover, it has to be fun. And that is probably one of the most difficult things to manage. How do you make things fun? I don't claim to have the answer to that, but I have attempts that I've made, and I'll tell you how that worked out. So a lot of games are created just for fun, for entertainment. Things like Minecraft, building is fun. Yeah, my grandchildren love Minecraft. They've got all this kind of stuff that they've built. Heyday, which is a farming game like Farmville. Decorating and arranging your farm is fun, and they really vary if you look across the farms. Angry Birds, becoming skillful is fun. Learning the trajectories, knocking down a whole bunch of things because you're really good at doing that. That's fun. Samurai versus Zombies, winning is fun. Getting rid of all the zombies as fast as possible and picking up the prizes along the way for doing that. That's all fun. But they do learn skill in the process of playing just fun games. However, there's a whole category called serious games, and those include games for work, such as the nursing training that goes on in Second Life. And Lorelei is pregnant today because she's she just told us that she's working on the nursing training, and she's going through this process to see if the professor wants to include that kind of that kind of simulation and role play for the nursing students. So that's a serious game that's conducted in Second Life all the time. But there's a lot of serious games like driving simulators. A lot of states require people use a driving simulator, basically a video game, to get their driver license. You have to keep the car on the road and not break any of the rules. And then, of course, the military video games that are for flight and combat training and so forth, even the ones that people like to play who aren't in the military, like Call of Duty, can be considered a serious game. And then there's a whole category of serious games with pro-social purposes, such as helping people to change their sustainability behavior. We have one at the University of Hawaii campus that's running in the dorms called the Kukui Cup. And the students get points for doing all sorts of things like turning off the lights and not letting the water run while they're brushing their teeth and things like that. So it engages them in becoming more ecologically aware and changing their behavior. And others help people to improve their health and longevity, like the Wii or Xbox. And there's a journal called Games for Health, and it's a really excellent journal that encourages and helps to develop healthy lifestyle habits through behavior modification and self-management of illness and chronic conditions, and by motivating and supporting physical activity, or games that help kids get their household chores done, like Chore Wars. We tried that for a while, and the kids liked it, but they kind of didn't like it after a while. So we have to keep constantly changing things in this environment. And of course, there are many games used in education. In Second Life, there are the language learning games that are played that are really good. And then there are web games for developing math skills. And there are spelling games like Scribble Knots. These are apps. And citation skills games like Biblionauts that was developed by an LIS professor's grant. And Val's asking about the Coursera gamification MOOC that's in progress now. I'm in that with Val and a couple of other people that I know. Sue Moon is in that one too. Okay. So it's really fascinating, and I'm learning a lot. In fact, that's my next slide. It's the picture of the professor, Dr. Kevin Werbach. And he is a legal studies professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, as it says there. And we're in the third week of the MOOC on gamification. He just spoke yesterday at the G Summit, the Game Summit 2013 in San Francisco. And he's really on top of it from the business point of view. So this is a business trend, a huge business trend. And you might have noticed that television programs, sports teams. They all have games now that you can get in apps and so forth for iPhones and tablets and so on. And so one of Werbach's points that I've taken away from this so far is that you need to see the students, in my case it's students, as players. You view them as players, not students. And that's how you can get a different perspective on learners that will allow you to make changes to increase engagement, to see where the fun can be brought in conjunction with the content. And it might not just be fun, it might be excitement or even some kinds of disturbing, challenging feelings. If you get people into scenarios where they have to, it's like a moral dilemma that they have to experience and try to come out of. So fun is really important because it keeps people coming back, but these other challenging environments and situations also increase engagement and are really important for learning. Yeah, it's great to see everybody here. Thank you so much for coming, and I'm really appreciative of Lori and Pat for inviting me. I really enjoyed putting this together to try to pull together all the things I've been skipping around trying to figure out. Yes, role-playing is significant, very significant, and I'll give some examples later in the presentation of how we've used that in our courses. So, gamification for education, when you look into it, besides looking at the learners as players, Carl Kapp has done a lot of research on gaming and education, and he likes to emphasize these 4 areas. The freedom to fail. In traditional learning environments, most learners do whatever's necessary to avoid failing. Failure is not a goal. But if you have a freedom to fail perspective, it encourages learners to take some chances, to use trial and error to explore and use discovery techniques. And this allows them to make multiple attempts at things to see the different effects of certain decisions in order to attain mastery. So it really emphasizes the trial and error approach to learning. And people actually enjoy that. They like to think how something might work out and try it, and if it doesn't work, they can try another thing and so forth. Sometimes managing that can be a challenge, too, for the professor, but the perspective, freedom to fail, is a really interesting one. He also encourages instructors to examine their materials and their activities to try to design an interesting beginning, a compelling middle, and an exciting ending, so that you can develop a flow of interest. And so it's like fiction, the pattern that fiction takes or the pattern that drama takes. It has to have that flow and not just all be one note. And then he talks about storytelling, and he gives the example of case studies with narratives, and dramatic elements can be very immersive and give learners roles in scenarios by having them work together to enact a scenario and come to conclusions on how to proceed through the role interactions. And I'll give some examples later how we found that role play is a very powerful learning tool, and it comes quite naturally to students. And his final point is one that we've seen before about frequent and targeted feedback, that learning is more effective when that is integrated. Instead of having people start an assignment and then weeks later they turn it in and then finally they get a grade, that's not the kind of feedback that he's talking about. Okay, another person that I think is important in the area of gamification for education is Dr. Scott Nicholson from Syracuse University. And he is very interesting because he started looking at libraries and what they do with game programming. So he's looked at that. He's also taught a course on games in libraries on YouTube, which is free. And he published a book on gaming activities in libraries. And he's now doing research on gamification, which means, applying it to the educational context. And he has got a great website called Because Play Matters, which is in the note card, and it's a really great place to go. He's somebody who's been working on this for a few years now, and he has made it his major focus. So I recommend his work highly. And a special area of information literacy we should pay attention to right here, because information literacy is something that both school and academic librarians spend a lot of time in formal development and teaching. Public librarians also are involved with information literacy, whether it's formal or informal. A lot of actually IL information literacy games have been created that can be incorporated into instruction. And there's a bunch more listed on the note card. These are a few of them. And they all have different premises and do different things. Some are simple, some are complex. Not listed on this slide is the New York Public Library's overnight scavenger hunt, where they had people spend the night one night, and then they created an app and an online game for people to use with an iPhone when they come into the library, or they can use the online game and create an avatar. And so these players write stories about the artifacts that they find, and they learn a lot about them along the way. And then the stories are posted on their site, and their site claims millions of stories have been posted. So it's really a fascinating development how people really took to that game. They called it Find the Future. And there's another place called Lycoming College, and there's a professor there who studies and creates games. So I've also listed their plagiarism game called Find the Goblins, in which, you know, it includes a storytelling aspect. So you're given the role of finding the goblins, and when you find one by clicking around, they're hiding. You get a multiple choice question about what you can do with a source, and if you answer it correctly, then you get the points for that and so forth, and you can save the day in the end. So it's trying to make plagiarism more exciting for students and make them really want to pay attention to it. So I'm not going into information literacy games particularly here, but there's also a book that has come out called, oh yes, well, it's on the list under the information literacy games, but it has 60 games in it for information literacy. It's an edited book, so a variety of librarians have contributed to it. Maybe JJ, I'm not familiar with his name there, but it's probably true if you say so. Okay, so the next thing I want to start to cover is Jane McGonigal. She's the person who has been most inspirational to me, probably because I came across her first, but also she's a serious games designer. And her TED Talk has had nearly 3 million views, and it's titled Gaming Can Make a Better World. And then she has a second one that has to do with health called Super Better. And her book called Reality is Broken is a New York Times bestseller, which is very unusual for an academic book, and it's used in courses. Came out in 2011. Her book, Reality is Broken, really inspired the work that I started at University of Hawaii in my courses, to gamify my courses. She is not just an inspirational speaker, but an excellent writer. And she has been reported to say that she doesn't like the word gamification. She thinks it's too commercial and too much oriented toward the business world. And where she's trying to do things that help people improve life for themselves and for everyone else. So she doesn't appear to be using that word at all. But that didn't stop me from incorporating what she brought to light for me. So the first thing that she talks about are the 4 essential game elements. And these elements are also provided in many books on how to build games and so forth. So it's sort of boiling down what is a game to these 4 elements, which when you read these, it doesn't sound too exciting at all. But of course, the goal or the outcome, and the rules that let you achieve the outcome, and feedback on how close you are, you know, am I there yet? Am I going to make it? And then the idea of voluntary participation or autonomy. So we applied these to some degree in various ways in several courses. In our UH Manoa courses, of course, traditionally lecture, demonstration, and classroom activities were staples before 2008 when I came to Second Life. But after reading about increased student involvement in game-like virtual learning environments, we decided to look at virtual world platforms for education and to see how ludic methods, as they can be called in the academic world, applied to course content promise to enliven and animate concepts within an environment that could be created to appear and function according to any specification. So the courses that we gamified were 8 courses over 4 years, including now, and it's over 600 students have been through these courses so far. They were offered at least twice in different semesters, and 4 of them have been offered every semester. They include undergraduate psychology courses and graduate library and information science courses. Those are mine. The graduate psychology courses are Dr. Driving Clarities. The web and the virtual world platform Second Life were used in all of these courses for the purposes of attending pre-announced events or class sessions, for making observations of some in-world or online activity, for working in project teams and finding objects and information for assignments, as well as designing and building interactive exhibits and presenting results of their work to the class and to specific audiences. Games always have a goal, as is pointed out by McGonigal and many others, or a series of outcomes. And the courses have goals embedded within assignments and due dates if you look at it as goals. There are several goals to accomplish for an entire course, for example, and within a given assignment there are sub-goals that represent component parts of the whole. Even group assignments can have points for component parts, for the parts written jointly, for the parts written individually. However, winning points alone is not sufficient to gamify assignments. So to encourage cooperation, creativity, and commitment, we developed team project assignments extending over several weeks that included merging and vetting joint research, planning for a deadline, and active and written production to an audience. The teams kept records of their progress with collaborative Google spreadsheets and Google Documents, and the instructors used the comment functions to answer questions, provide information, and give suggestions right in the documents. So we were inside their documents, which the students had surprised reactions to, like, oh, the professor's here. Sometimes they would like skip out when they saw my icon up there on the document. But anyway, they got used to it and came to appreciate it. The rules in a course can exist at the macro and micro levels. For the purposes of gamification, the micro rules and the limitations on methods were developed for particular assignments. For instance, students formed their own teams using a collaborative spreadsheet with the names and the profile of the other students. And the times, they had to fill in the times that they're available to meet online in 2-hour periods. And based on those availability times, the teams composed themselves with people that could meet at the same times that they could meet. Each team consisted of 4 students, and the students are responsible for setting up and scheduling 4 different teams over the semester. So they changed every 4 weeks, every 3 to 4 weeks, they changed teams. And when they're in teams, they perform these prescribed weekly activities, such as joint research, immersive environment activities, or role plays. After the activity, each student will then post an individual lab report describing the activity in detail, including the time of the meeting and who was present, so they're documenting it like archivally. And students are required also to read and reply to each other's lab reports and cite each other in their responses. So that's getting them to notice and claim responsibility for the words of others. These detailed procedures have been developed over several terms to allow students to take responsibility for their learning, to be innovative and responsive to each other, and to actively join the community, as well as build the community by choosing and negotiating teams and times on their own initiative. Okay, TR has a question about failure. Does it have unfortunate side effects on motivation? And of course, it could have unfortunate side effects on motivation because people don't like to fail. I've had that experience even in a game that's not on a computer, but at a workshop at LOEX one year. We were in these teams and we had to do this exercise called Petals Around the Rose. And our table couldn't solve it, and we were dejected, I have to say. We really did feel unintelligent among our peers. So yes, there is something like that, but having the attitude that it's okay to fail, it brings out different behavior in students, and it frees them from constraints that they normally put on themselves. So it's good to experiment with that and see what effect it can have on motivation. So the third one is feedback, and in courses that often corresponds to grading done after the fact. In these courses, the point systems are cumulative over the term, and students keep track of their own records, both online and they're shared with instructors. So the points gained are by completing activities according to specifications, and the points lost have to do with failing to meet deadlines and length requirements, and for missing assignments. But these can be made up, so there's a fail-safe there too. When students keep records of their own accomplishments, they then become more involved in monitoring their cumulative performance so that they try to improve their record as the term proceeds. Instructor comments on the collaborative documents are also formative feedback on their progress and guidance on what needs to be done. Students can reply to the instructors in the documents and ask questions. So instead of being passive recipients of grades, they become active managers of their performances. And this approach affords the students a formative perspective on their learning over time, as well as a summative perspective at the end, which they're used to. Their grades thus become self-directed achievements. And the final point about voluntary participation, this occurs in a variety of ways and at different levels in our courses. Building in this kind of autonomy can activate intrinsic motivation where the work itself becomes the reward. Each week, the teams negotiate among the choices of activities, and choice is also built into each component of an activity, including selecting topics, role characters, content from research and readings, and other aspects. So they really have to construct everything, but from a pool that they can use. Choice is built into subject matter, methods, and measures or assessments where students design, implement, and report data from pilot studies in their research assignments. Creativity is encouraged through autonomy, and students often comment that the work was fun, enlightening, and confidence building. Second Life provides this creative environment that students enjoy for animating situations and scenarios from course content, such as the accident reconstruction assignment on this slide. So the students are at the virtual driving track there, and they are putting the cars in place according to a court case that they read about that had the details of the accident reconstruction. And they were able to put it together there and put on a presentation based on that. Okay, this next slide is what I consider my greatest inspiration from McGonigal. She calls it the 4 game powers, and they're listed there. The first is urgent optimism, or the ability to continuously scan the environment to discover the next quest to engage. And the second is blissful productivity, or the ability to persevere in the face of challenge by using feedback to check your progress. Just keep working on it, just keep working on it. And the third is social fabric, or the ability to feel that one belongs to a community where each shares in the work and contributes to the progress of the whole group. And the fourth is a sense of epic meaning, or the ability to consider and work toward larger purposes than the self, because big picture narratives facilitate commitment and cooperation. These 4 skills represent orientations that can tap a personal drive to mastery and to accomplish goals with others. While we educators always strive to spark intrinsic motivation in students with compelling content and with active learning methods, engagement can remain elusive and inconsistent. But by contrast, in game contexts, intrinsic motivation is both primary and continuous. Therefore, in recent years, elements of games have been introduced into college curricula because of their promise of enabling this continuous engagement to enhance learning. And there are a lot of references on the note card to lead you to those kinds of studies. So these 4 game powers inspired us quite a lot in order to create an architecture for the courses. So it's the instructional gamification architecture that we are using currently. So the first is involving social immersion affordances that are going to provide a game environment to stimulate urgent optimism. And here we have used Adobe Connect video conferencing, but primarily Second Life, and as well as Instagram and Pinterest. These social environments and also visual and interesting environments have helped to make this urgent optimism concept more obvious to us. So, for example, on the previous slide, I'm going to go back again to the images here. The one on the right is the Boolean pool, and that's at Know-How Island in Second Life. Urgent optimism in the face of several failed attempts was expressed as another strategy to try. These were students in the information literacy pedagogy class that I teach. So one of them, they were working in chat as a team and while at the pool. So one of them said, "It looks like there are 4 items that match the OR query, and there are 4 of us. So if we each hold 1 item in the circle, it should work." But this strategy also failed because someone previously had taken one of the pool toys, so the interactive animation script failed. And we didn't know that. But nevertheless, before quitting, this team, urgent optimism continued through 9 more attempts to find a way to solve the query. So it wasn't possible, but they kept trying. And back to the point about motivation flagging, it did flag, but only after 9 attempts, and they finally gave up. And then I queried the designer to find out what was going on, and he figured out what happened and put the toy back. So we got it solved. It took a little time, but urgent optimism was really obvious in their chat and in the actions of the avatar, so you can show it in machinima or a series of photographs. The second part of the architecture, task collaboration affordances to encourage perseverance and blissful productivity. And in that area, we use Google Documents, Google Presentations, JuMag, a free magazine creation tool, and Keepsy. And the picture here at the bottom left is a role-play team assignment to research a road rage case and put on a mock trial. So in this case, the students persevered through complex intervening steps by negotiating in team meetings and making progress toward winning the case and finally putting it on in this courtroom environment that we have up on the Dr. Driving's virtual driving track. So the one student wrote about this particular assignment. This week's lab was very challenging because of the pressure we have on us to do our very best and win the trial case we have coming up. We have spent a few weeks preparing for this. My part was very challenging because I had the attorney and I had to be very flexible. I have to work with my clients and use their stories to make the best argument that I have. But trying something like this, I thought it was very fun because when in life do I ever get to play a lawyer? So that was an example of the task collaboration affordances and how role play is involved in using those tools. The next one is evidence-based affordances to support a sense of epic meaning. We had to figure out how can we make epic meaning part of this, part of teaching, because in games it's really pretty obvious when people get really excited about an epic win, or in the serious games when they believe that they've done good either for themselves or for others or for their community. Role-playing enables students to adopt these different relationship strategies, and in a marriage class, for example, and to see themselves as becoming better partners, better people, and better role models for their children. A sense of epic meaning was expressed in terms of the insights gained in role-play assignments, and we saw this throughout the reports that we went through. One student wrote, "Writing the dialogues according to the other-centered and the self-centered models was enlightening. I never realized how negative I am whenever my partner asks a question. How could I not see that? Makes me wonder what else I'm not aware of that I would change." And in the virtual driving class, students have the driving psychology class. They have the opportunity to see themselves as heroes, which is epic, by overcoming natural tendencies to think terrible thoughts about other drivers and drive aggressively. That's very common. I'm sure none of you know anything about that, but we find that a lot of people have these experiences in driving. So one student wrote, "I know for me personally, before I took this class, I would get very emotionally charged when I got behind the wheel, rather. And although after having taken this class and having read the 2 books, I feel like I'm more emotionally intelligent when it comes to driving. I feel like this class has helped me immensely to develop that. It was a very interesting class because most of the people in our group said that they felt the same way. I thought that was really neat." And we often saw many types of expressions like this, that the role play, where students were able to take the perspective of another or a different professional role, really had a big impact on them, and it made them look at their own behavior in comparison, and it served as almost a vicarious role modeling so that they could say, "Oh, I'm going to be more like this, and now I know how to go about doing it." So the references are in the note card, not on the slide here. And this picture, by the way, is from one of the events that my students created in the Information Literacy Pedagogy class, where they held an information literacy panel on Web 2.0 approaches to information literacy, and had 4 invited speakers and a very large audience of librarians. Actually, there were 40 people there, so it was one of the more exciting and well-attended events that my students got to create, and it made them feel very empowered and confident and proud of what they had done. Even though the content was all coming from the experts, the students really got a lot out of it. 2.1, okay. Thank you, TR. I want to thank you, mahalo, for your kind attention, and now we have time for questions and comments. I may not have gotten everything from the chat as I was talking, but JJ said, "How loose can the rules and guidelines be and still motivate students to role play?" Well, ours weren't really loose, so we haven't experimented with making things really flexible in terms of those guidelines. But we could do that. We just found that students really appreciate having some really specific role that they need to research, and a way to portray that role with each other when they're in a team meeting, in chat, and so forth, plus the resources that they use from the readings that support the way that the role would be enacted. So I would suggest, playing around with that flexibility to see what you can do with it. Some students would be really amenable to it. Some students who love creativity, can do a lot with very little, sort of like the improv people who are really good at doing improv. Okay. Yes, well, Second Life is a real case in point. There are so many communities where elaborate role-playing is continuous and is not what I'm talking about, which is in a course that you take for a certain period of weeks and then you're off either graduating or you are going to another course where nothing like that occurs. So it's just really an isolated incident, the courses that I'm doing this in and that are done in the psychology department. The students do not get an education like that. They just have this one experience of this one course that is like that. Hi, Shaylee. Yes, many of the students were asynchronous online courses. So yes, they are distance learners, and we found that a major key is that they have to be put together in working teams online, despite the fact that they are asynchronous. So we created a Google spreadsheet where they can put up their time availability, and they can create teams based on people's availability. So they have to do that every week, work with one team for a month, and then switch teams. But that dynamic has been incredibly successful because in online asynchronous classes, you know, you can just be alone. You can just feel so alone. If it wasn't for Val setting up meetups for the gamification MOOC, that would be the feeling there, because it's really watching videos and answering quizzes and writing short assignments. And then there is a forum where you can talk to people socially, but I notice people don't really interact that much. They just put their opinion, but they don't kind of relate to the other person's opinion, so it's not as social as maybe some forums can be. But without Val's meetups, there would be really nobody to talk to about what we're going through in that online course every week. You want to take one of my courses, JJ? You're welcome anytime. I do. If I don't teach mine online, I allow people to come in a hybrid fashion through Adobe Connect. But I do teach mine synchronously, whereas Dr. Driving's courses are all asynchronous. Okay, so yeah. Second Life, I'm not sure why they would be reluctant to come in synchronously. We haven't had problems with that because they're able to set up their own time and they like to be able to feel like they're together. Of course, they also use Google Plus Hangouts so they can see each other. And so it might be a good idea to allow them to use both kinds of environments so they can see each other in real-world appearances as well as Second Life appearances. That might be the key to overcoming their reluctance. Oh, thank you, Val. Thank you so much for coming. It was really good having you here, and thank you for the meetups and the collaboration in the MOOC. Sure, Shaylee. Oh, JJ, okay, I'll send you something as soon as I have it together. We're just ending our term now. Next week is our last sessions in classes, so it's kind of like all over with now. But we'll be restarting in August.
We appreciated having you here. It was an excellent presentation.
Thank you. I don't claim to be an expert on gamification by any means, but I've given you a lot of resources to people that are. And so if you want to explore it, you can get into it through the note card.
I will certainly do that.
Thank you, Professor Dan. I appreciate it. Thank you, Callisto, AM Vans, Damien. Thank you, Serene. Oh, this is a fabulous group. It's just amazing. It's really attracted a good-sized audience. Thank you, Linus. Oh, Snow, thank you for coming. Long time no see.
Thank you, Diane. It was a wonderful presentation.